Gentlemen, the time has come once again to discuss things.
Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Geeky Gentlemen. I am Sid Part 2. Joining me today is...
Me.
And shaboy.
Awesome. I love how awkward these things are. No one has any enthusiasm on this show besides myself.
Never for the intro.
No, never for the intro. Ah.
No ramp up.
Yeah, well, you know what, Steve? Tell the people what the people need to know.
Well, the people need to know that the Geeky Gentleman video series is also a podcast, which you can find a link to at the description of each episode. And if you would like an older episode of Geeky Gentleman, just go to the video in the Geeky Gentleman playlist, leave a comment, and Ian will upload it at his earliest convenience.
Oh, yeah, that's pretty much it. Finally, someone who can actually go through the thing.
Without any ands, ums, or buts.
Yeah, Rasco, take some goddamn notes. Write it down somewhere.
Do I get a raise now?
No,
Damn
we
it.
give raises based on performance, and that was a good performance, but that's what we expect. We want exceptional performance.
So, like, everything except the performance. Okay.
Anyway. So, Rasco, you picked this topic, and I'm really curious to see if you even remember what the topic is.
Okay, as far as I remember, the topic is video games and if they are an evolution of film.
Okay, no. Thanks for watching this episode of Geeky Gentlemen. I hope everyone enjoyed. It was a good time. Good discussion, boys.
Cool.
Yep.
Guess I can go to bed.
I mean, does anyone here have the opinion that they are, or like in any way, shape, or form think that they are?
I don't, and the reason I wanted to talk about this was because of a Collider video. I think it might have been on Collider, it might have been on some other channel that exists. It's like Film HQ or something. I know it was John Schnepp from Collider Movie Talk made this video. It was either on like Film HQ or Collider, and he was talking about the evolution of film and like where he thinks it's going. And it's been a long time since I've seen this video, but it was just like one of those videos where I'm like, I don't agree with a single thing you've said this entire video. And it just irritated the shit out of me because it's this mindset of movies are like fucking theme park rides. And like, so the evolution of movies would have to be like interactive video game movie thing. And it's just this big bullshit, like, ugh, I couldn't take it.
You know, it's funny because I believe that was more or less the attitude of the people writing Star Trek, which is really weird when you consider they're writing a television series, right? But like Next Generation, DS9, Voyager, they all had the holodeck as a plot device that they could use. And they all, at one point or another, made fun of the existence of movies. Like, I specifically remember an episode of Voyager, Harry Kim goes, God, I can never just imagine sitting by passively and watching a television show. I'm like, you realize you're writing this for a television show, right? What kind of dialogue is that? You're downplaying your medium. So I don't know. I thought that was always really strange, but I guess it does lead to a more interesting question about the evolution of video games more than it does the evolution of film. Because how much is truly left to be done with film at this point, and how far can video games take us?
Well, I think there might be a little bit on the other end of that, too, of, like, what video games do to movies. Because I think this comes back to, like, G.I. Joe and Transformers starting as toys, but to sell the toys, they needed comic books and TV shows. And so these mediums are crafted to very specific ends because of another medium. Things like Fast and Furious wouldn't be the way they are if we didn't have, like, a very particular zeitgeist about, like, superheroes and comic book movies. Because they play on those tropes a lot, except they just don't have superpowers, allegedly, despite the way they drive those cars.
The cars have powers.
The cars have powers.
It's
but like
real Monster Trucks. Monster Truck is a prequel.
But like, I feel like there's a very genuine track from like the way we used to make action movies versus the way we do now when you compare them to how video game action cinematics work. Like, running down a hall as everything behind you blows up is not a thing we used to do. It's not a thing we could do, usually. Especially with things like parkour with characters and stuff. The way superheroes in those movies move, I think, is heavily influenced by, like, more acrobatic-style, Devil May Cry-style video games.
Yeah, Devil May Cry, Prince of Persia, that kind of, like, wall jumping and stuff.
Yeah, exactly. The way Batman fights in BVS, as much as I hate that movie, is very much Arkham City.
Yeah.
And, yeah, so I think the answer to the question, are video games the evolution of movies, is a very hard no. But do these mediums affect each other in their own individual evolution might be the more interesting question. Because, you know, I like the God of War series. I always talk about that when I talk video games. But there's been rumors of a movie for that for 12 years now. Since the initial title's release on PS2, they've been talking about making a movie out of it. And every time I see an interview with the creator of God of War updating about the and someone asks him about the development of the movie, he says, well, I just feel like video games pull a lot from movies. So the reason a lot of video game movies don't work out is you're getting like a retread of a retread, but you're just not playing it. So it feels very bland, like you've seen all of it before. So if we make a God of War movie, we want to try not to do that. And he goes off and do this whole thing. But I think there's something to that. We talk about the evolution of cutscenes and all these other things in video games, and they're taking their cues from film as far as how framing should work, how all these other things should work. So I don't feel like we're talking about video games replacing movies. I feel we're talking about film and photography in a similar way. Like, I feel like, you know, there was photography, and then film happened, and photography didn't go away. It just became much more specialized. I don't think film's going to go away. Certain genres of film might die down in popularity and be replaced by that genre kicking up more in video games as the technology improves, and you don't have to there's not as much of a learning curve to playing a very dense game.
Yeah,
so, like, sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say, when it comes to like video games, another thing that is important to keep in mind is like when you're playing a video game, at least when I'm playing a video game, I would like for the story to utilize the fact that I'm interacting with the video game. Like the emotional response that you have to whatever story is being told, it needs to, I think it should at least take advantage of its medium and the fact that you're actively doing things and making decisions. Whereas in a movie, there's a very clear difference in that you're completely, it's a passive experience, like in terms of like how you physically interact with whatever it is you're watching, right? You're mentally engaged with it, but you're not supposed to have control in a movie. Whereas, like, the point of video games is that you're supposed to have control. So I think with video games, what video games I think I've learned, and this is actually, I don't want to even say they've learned this, because it's been there from a lot of more narrative-focused games for a long time, but now we're figuring out new ways to utilize this, and that's, you utilize the fact that people are making decisions, and that should have some sort of impact on their experience with the game. I'm not saying that necessarily just like, I'm not saying like choose your own outcome, but like when Matt was talking about that game, Spec Ops: The Line, and how you're doing all of these bad things in that game, and like that's kind of like a thematic point that like you're doing these things. It's like your interaction with the game is kind of the point of the game.
Yeah, just like how I saved the multiverse by not reading Multiversity.
Yeah.
You're definitely onto something.
Well, okay, here's the thing I think that goes along with this. You can, like, I don't think this is true, but, like, if someone said watching a movie versus watching a TV show, they don't feel like different experiences, I'll give that to them. Obviously, every medium is a different experience, but, like, watching one screen for a certain period of time versus watching another screen for a period of time is a more nuanced experience that sometimes is harder to articulate. I don't think anyone can deny that playing a video game and watching a movie are two totally different sensual experiences. At the same time, though, video games know this, and they've capitalized on this for years, unlike something like comic books, where like it took decades for them to figure out how they don't have to imitate movies.
And even still.
Yeah, and even still, I wrote about this previously, but like I like to describe comics as the jealous medium, where like they can't do like anything, but they try so hard. And sometimes it works to great effect, other times it doesn't, like when Alan Moore tries to have music in a comic. Video games are different. Video games are intentionally designed from a place that a film could never actually do, and even if we get to the point where like you're watching a theater and a theater has like a choose-your-own-adventure aspect to the movie, it's suddenly more of a video game than it is a movie.
Yeah.
So video games didn't have this, like, jealousy, so to speak. And yet, video games seem to be trying very hard to be movies lately. Arkham Knight's whole thing of, like, you never experience a cutscene, that you always flow into them. That's a thing you want to do if you want to craft it as, like, a 20-hour movie. It's not a thing you expect purely from a video game standpoint. And, like, other video games do this where, like, Uncharted is entirely based around the notion of play the action movie. It predicates itself on a notion of an action movie before anything else, or before anything even inherent to it. Mm-hmm. And I think that's weird.
Yeah. And to the point about Uncharted, you know what happened the last time I played through all the Uncharted games? Or to that point, there were two. It's been a couple years. I had a real hankering to watch Indiana Jones.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's really it, though. It's like, video games take a lot of aspects from movies, but it's kind of undeniable that getting to play the parts of movies that would be eventually boring as shit to watch is inherently fun because you're the one doing it. So you'd never want that kind of experience in a movie. You know, you see people do this on YouTube where they'll take a game and they'll cut the cinematics out and they'll try their best to play through it as solidly as they can and use as little of the Let's Play footage as possible to tell a coherent story. It doesn't always work very well because it's not intended to be viewed that way. But you see people try to do it, and it just becomes rather boring, where you're just kind of sitting there waiting for them to get through this section so the story can continue. But when you're playing it, that's not a problem. We hear people...
Let's Plays are weird, because like, there are people that consciously edit out any failing whatsoever, and then there are the people that are so bad at it that they should edit out more failings.
Well, like, I was speaking more to the people who, like, try to, like, go online, right, or go on YouTube right now and Google Jak and Daxter the movie. Mm-hmm. And you will see someone has taken the cutscenes from that game, spliced in gameplay footage, doing either the mission perfectly or showing you as little as possible from the mission, and then it goes to the next cutscene.
Right.
Yeah, people try to do that, and it just gets really boring to watch, especially if there's not a person talking.
Yeah, I don't like those. Those do really bore me as well. When I tried to watch through the Arkham Knight quote unquote movie before we talked about it on Geekvolution, and I just couldn't do it. Mm-hmm. Something about playing that game twice is more desirable than just spending literally a fraction of that time watching it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's one of those things. It's just it's very difficult to capture the fun of a video game in just the passive movie experience. And at the same time, it's very difficult to try to show dynamic action in a movie that can actually get you pumped up. There's, Rasko and I, we review fan films. There's some bad action scenes in some fan films where it just isn't cut very well, goes on too long. It's a different toolkit for each thing. Can you imagine if you were imagine just the worst run you've ever had in a fight scene in a video game, like Uncharted. You gotta take out the guys, and it takes you fucking forever and a day to do it. You don't die at all, but it takes you forever and a day to get it done. And then imagine that translated to live action, and you're sitting there watching it in a theater. You would be so bored. It doesn't matter how many times Nathan Drake almost dies. It's that, it's incompetent filmmaking at that point.
The first Avengers movie, I think, has this. I love that movie, but that final action scene's too fucking long. It's 45 minutes long. I don't need that much action.
Well, it's weird, because it's action scene, and then briefest possible respite in the world, and then action scene. It's
just so much nonstop action that if I was playing it, I would have no problem with. Mm-hmm. It's almost the brief action scenes in video games that are more annoying.
Yeah.
Everyone's loved this fight, I don't. The Deathstroke fight in Arkham Origins, where you're entirely cinematic style counter based. That's too easy, and I find it boring because it goes by way too quickly, and it's not satisfying. Because I'm not really beating Deathstroke, I just hit a button at the right time.
Mm-hmm.
I know what you're saying. That being said, I do like that fight.
That's fair. I guess it looks cool. I just don't like playing it because I feel like I'm not doing anything.
So you could just sit there and watch it by someone who's really good at it, and get a better experience even.
Well, here's the other thing, though, that I wanted to mention since we're talking about this. Let's Plays are that weird line between movies and video games, where, on a technical level, you are watching a movie, but your experience watching this movie is fundamentally different because it's a video game.
Yeah.
And people complain about this. We did a whole episode on this, about the notion of, Let's Plays should be boring on principle, but they're not.
Right, and I'll leave a link to that episode, because it is a fun one.
And that was the one where you, had gameplay footage to it, didn't you?
Yeah, I tried to do that with all the video game topics. This one I won't be, just because I want to use fucking Jacob's art. He did, really cool character designs, and I worked on the background, so...
You could do both. You could just, have a minimized screen of the video game.
Or I could just... No, I'm not doing that. I'm not doing that. I tried to do that. I did that the last time we talked video games, did the Prince of Persia gameplay. But yeah, Let's Plays should be inherently boring, but there's something in the fact that you have someone there. Something like Game Grumps is similar to a Riff Tracks or Mystery Science Theater in my mind. Sometimes, you can have someone who's pretty dull and boring as far as a personality, but you're so impressed with their talent in a game that you can be really fascinated, too.
Yeah.
So, Let's Plays are that weird thing where I don't think you're watching it to get the same experience you do playing it, though.
Yeah.
I don't think I could say I've ever watched a Let's Play, and it has given me the experience of playing it. Though I might be contradicting myself on that because I really, really love watching Mario Maker Let's Plays.
Those are just so creative, though.
Yeah.
That whole game is on a different discussion level because of the creativity.
Mm-hmm.
No, it's weird, though, right? Because, I wouldn't say I substitute video games for Let's Plays, but I also wouldn't say I substitute Let's Plays for like cinematics and for cinematic video game movies that you can find on YouTube. It's this weird in-between ground where like on some level it's a movie, on some level it's a video game, but like it plays to neither of those sensibilities completely.
Uh-huh.
And I don't know, I just think that's weird.
It is, and it's like, I don't know, like, Cap does this shit all the time, and he's been doing it for years. It's like the one series that he's done that, like, never goes away, and it's movie commentaries. And I'm like, I have no interest in those whatsoever.
Oh, wow.
I barely have the interest in watching, like, a director commentary or you know, someone that was actually involved in making the film. I don't need you to tell me your thoughts on the movie while I watch you talk over the movie for, like, just some reviewer or something.
That's so weird. I'm totally on the opposite side of that. I love commentaries.
Me too. Literally the first thing I do when I buy a movie is sit down and listen to the commentary.
Well, like, you know, I have to, for me to watch it like a director's commentary, I need to watch the movie first. Like, again, even if I've seen it before, I need to watch the movie again and then watch the director or whatever commentary. Because I need it fresh in my mind. I hate when they talk over something. It's like, oh, here we did this. I'm like, I don't even know what you're talking about anymore. But, so I can understand those. I can be interested in those from time to time. But, like, I love Cap to death, but some random schmo on the internet giving his thoughts, I'm like, just fucking do a review. I don't need you to do a commentary. I
guess commentaries are commentaries. I feel like there are certain things where, like, doing a review as long as the movie is almost an interesting challenge, but it's a fundamentally different experience. Like, okay, my ideal way of talking about BVS is not a review and it's not a commentary. It's kind of the in-between ground where, like, I would sit down and watch the movie and then pause so I can talk about it literally piece by piece by piece by piece. It'd be like a 6-hour video, but, like, that's how I would talk about that movie. But then other things, like, there are certain things with a commentary where, like, talking to someone as you're watching a scene is just an inherently fun experience. Mm-hmm. So I see it less of, like, reviewing the movie as someone's listening, but just like having a conversation while watching a movie, and I just like doing that.
Okay, yeah, I can see that, but at the same time, that's not something I can really watch. Unless you're like just straight riffing on the movie, making fun of it, that's not something I can just sit down and experience, whereas I can experience exactly that in a video game.
At some point, I would love to get your opinion on Commentary the Musical.
What the fuck?
Okay, so Joss Whedon did Dr. Horrible, and for Dr. Horrible, because this was during the writer's strike, he was hyper-creative, and the commentary for Dr. Horrible is itself a musical with songs. So
I did not know this.
It's not perfect. There are places where, like, the songs run over a little bit of the scene they're talking about, but it's almost entirely perfectly timed. So, like, it's like they're having a natural conversation and getting into production shit and stuff like that, while it's a musical with distinct songs.
That's funny. It's
really cool. I would love to get your thoughts on that, because it's, on the surface level, far more entertaining than a regular commentary.
I'm certain. But yeah, it's this weird distinction where I don't think I could do that with movies, whereas I can totally do that with video games. I do that with video games all the time, just watch someone else play it. I don't know. I don't understand where this, like, thought that the two are essentially indistinguishable, that one's the evolution of the other. Again, I think that we'll certainly see less things of certain genres show up in films as video games get easier and easier to play so that they're more accessible to people. That might be maybe a little... Alright, can we all agree that the holodeck in Star Trek is a video game?
Yes.
I mean, it's like the most advanced video game system ever. It creates intelligent life by accident every other goddamn week, but it's the most immersive video game of all time.
I mean, virtually reality video games basically want to be the holodeck, so yes.
Yeah, exactly. So you watch them doing stuff like that. You watch, Captain Picard play a 1920s detective. Yeah, that might be more fun to do as a video game than it would be to sit there and watch a movie, depending. Again, hopefully you don't accidentally create life, but whatevs. I guess what I'm saying is just, as video games get closer and closer to that kind of standard, and they get more accessible to people so that you don't have to learn... Like, once video games get beyond the point of needing a tutorial, if that makes any sense. Once it is entirely intuitive, everything you need to know about the game you already know from just living. You don't have to press X to jump. There is no X to press. You just physically jump. Once video games get to that point, if that should ever happen, then there will be certain types of movies that probably just don't get made anymore. I'm trying to think of, like, a good example. Like, what's...
Well, maybe this is a good correlation. I just have Devil May Cry on the mind because I've been playing it a lot lately. Not the classics, but the reboot game. We've never made a movie like Devil May Cry. Ever. The closest we ever get are things like Van Helsing, and even that is not Devil May Cry. And we have dozens and dozens of video games like this. Bayonetta, God of War, Devil May Cry. There's a whole subgenre of video games of this aesthetic that never get made into movies. Mm-hmm. They just don't exist as a movie. Or even comics. Or TV shows.
Yeah. And it's just because the story might be compelling in the moment, but it's just inherently more interesting to experience it by doing it, right?
Right. Like, the charm with Devil May Cry is that, like, there's a fuck ton of weapons. So, everyone's playstyle is different because everyone has a different assortment of 4 or 5 weapons they keep going back to. That's not a thing you can really capture anywhere. And if you tried to, you'd just be appealing to the video game. And in similar veins, we don't really have like romantic comedy video games. Like, Japanese video games kind of do this. They've got kind of like the side scroller style. You're playing
the dating simulators.
Yeah, that's kind of it. But that's a very niche thing. It's not like it's fleshed out and created its own multimedia empire as its own genre. But, like, that's another genre that, like, exists on film in a way it does not in video games, or couldn't in video games.
I guess,
I'm just trying to think of, like, if there were plays that we did that were, like, big, expansive things, and then we just really don't do those anymore because it's easier and works better on film. I'm trying to think if there's, like, a genre of play that has kind of died out. I guess slapstick vaudeville-style theater has died out, and a lot of the stuff that you would have seen on the old vaudeville shows is either going to be in films or on television now.
Yeah,
like,
probably fair.
What's a good example? A lot of the reality game show kind of things. Those would have been basically like, using the term theater and stage loosely here, but those would have been live performance kind of things. And now they still have the studio audience, but it's just broadcast. It's not done. You wouldn't ever see that in a theater anymore.
There was a very brief time where, like, video games and game shows were, like, in sync with each other. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure if you guys remember this. Like, it was right around the time of the Wii where, like, video game shows were dying. But, like, they had this last Hail Mary, which was video games, specifically with the Wii. So, like, you could download things like Who Wants to Be a Millionaire and Family Feud and all that shit. And, like, because of the Wii is entirely, like, individual-based, there would be an online mode where, like, people get invited to actual video game competitions of these things, and they would have, like, actual in-game audiences. And it was a whole thing. As if it was basically the game show, except through a video game system. But it died out really fast.
Yeah, that's not something I'd heard of. Like, I've seen the Game Grumps playthroughs of the Wii, television game shows. Are so fucking funny.
Yeah.
My God, no, you don't understand. I'm going to talk about this shit. Aaron playing The Bachelorette is one of the funniest fucking things in the world. Because, like, it's kind of like Mario Party, is the best way I can explain it. Because you just do these fucking mini games, and the whole time Aaron is, like, dead set that he's going to win this guy's heart. And so there's this one game where you have to, like, pop octagons or some shit. And he's like, I'm going to pop all these octagons to win Brett's heart. I'm going to do it. He's going to be really impressed with the octagons I can pop. And that was just the funniest shit ever to me. I lost my shit, laughed my ass off at that.
Some of those
yeah,
are great.
I know those games. I did not know it created an online sensation.
Yeah, it was really fucking weird. Deal or No Deal was a big one like that. But that's when Deal or No Deal was basically dead.
Yeah. I don't even know. Is that show still going on?
I have no idea. I stopped watching a long time ago.
Yeah.
There was a point in that show where, like, they were just trying to give away $1 million and it didn't work and I gave up watching it.
Anyway. So yeah, that's where I'm really coming down. Rasco, you take us somewhere, because you've been quiet and I'm running out of things to say.
Okay, I wanted to talk about so a lot of video games that I find myself playing are video games where, like, after the fact, I can tell you a story about what happened when I was playing the video game, but the video game itself doesn't have a story. It just has a bunch of mechanics that will inherently create stories that you can tell people. So what I mean by that is, two of my favorite video games are Left 4 Dead and XCOM. And those are both games that in no way are trying to be movies, but you wind up in these incredibly cinematic scenarios that if I were to describe to you, like, the emotion I was feeling while playing, you would be like, oh my God, that's crazy, that's awesome. So, like, Left 4 Dead, it's like a zombie game. You go around, you kill zombies, you gotta get to the end of the level. But there's no cinematic cutscenes or anything. But, like, crazy shit will happen. Like, you could be playing the game and you're on a bridge, and then all of a sudden this one mutant called the Charger comes out, and it could literally knock 3 of you off the bridge. And, like, it's just one person alive now. And it's this crazy experience where you're, like, super, like, oh my God. And when you tell that story, it sounds like you're describing a video game cinematic almost, or a movie. And XCOM is very much like that, where you have no story. Like, anything could happen at any time in that game. Any of your favorite characters that you create could die in that game, and they're gone for good. And so you get in these, like, scenarios where you'll have some character that's dying, and they need to be, like, revived. And then you're on your, so you're taking one character and you're trying to move them across the board to the other character so you can resurrect that person. And, like, maybe that person gets killed while you're trying to do that. And it's this huge, like, oh no, I just lost 2 people. And, like, shit like this happens. And you get horribly, horribly emotionally invested in things to where it sounds like you're talking about a movie, yet, like, the storytelling aspect is almost like this 100% interactive element where it's all about how you interact with the game. And I'm of the mindset that I like games like that more so than and it's weird because I can list off a bunch of games that are very story focused, but I always find myself being pulled towards games that the story is fully circumstantial. Like, it's not laid out for you. They just give the tools for the chaos to take place, but they don't set anything up to happen a certain way. And I was just like, what do you guys think about that?
I have a very similar thing with, like, when I used to play Call of Duty Online. I never beat the stories for any of those games. I only ever played, like, the first 2 or 3 levels to get accustomed to, like, how this version of the game feels.
Yeah.
Then it's entirely online driven, and, like, the fun of those games is creating the narrative around your experience of it. Like, I used to have so many stories of, like, I went down this hallway and shot this person and, like, picked up this thing and then I died doing this. Like, it's entirely based on me actually playing it in a way only I would play it. And that is, in a lot of ways, a lot more passionate, a lot more emotional than I get with any story modes in video games. Not to say that video games can't have deep stories, they absolutely can, but, like, there's almost like a sports effect of, like, irrational joy that comes out of those situations. Throwing a controller against the wall doesn't happen because a cutscene. It happens because of something you're physically doing.
Yeah.
And I think that's the big difference in what makes video games not better, but unique.
And, you know, it's interesting to think about that, particularly with the controller throwing example, because video games tap into a completely different part of the brain than movies do, or television for that matter. You know, the brain has very archaic conceptions of, you know, quest and reward, action and reward. You know, this is how conditioning works. You can condition a child. That's what the education system is. You know, we have these ideas of, okay, take out the garbage and you get a candy bar or whatever. And it conditions you slowly over time until you realize it, that you're getting this reward for this thing. Video games work on very much the same, can work, rather, on very similar principles, where do this action, get reward, even though it's not a physical object, your brain still treats it that way because you're the one doing this to yourself, you're playing the game, and you're putting in all this effort, and then you're getting what is, to you at least, a reward, even though it's, you know, ones and zeros at you. You get an achievement on Xbox or whatever. So that's tapping into a very different part of your brain. So you're right. When you're throwing the controller, like, I've had incredibly emotional reactions to movies and television shows. I just had one the other day watching an episode of Enterprise. Not a positive one. Very controller throwing-esque, though. I've had those reactions, but it's not in the same way, whereas I've thrown a controller because, god damn it, I want to beat this fucking boss so I can beat the game, and I just can't fucking do it. The work is too hard. Like, I've been there. I've felt that experience. It's honestly like you are in the fucking battlefield fighting the guy.
It's almost like a drug reaction. Like, playing a game, like, I'll go with the Call of Duty example, because I used to play the shit out of Call of Duty. I just remember, like, in Call of Duty Black Ops, they had COD points, which was just like money, and you had to, like, once you unlocked golden camo, you had to earn 50,000 COD points just to buy a camo for your gun.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like and I was addicted to that. Like, I was just, like, obsessed with collecting as many different gold camos for as many, because you had to, like, literally buy 50,000, like, you had to use 50,000 COD points per gun. So if I wanted this gun gold, I had to earn 50,000 COD points and then buy it specifically for that gun. And it's like a drug reaction to satisfy you. And that's like, because it is you're not, like, physically getting anything out of it, but in your brain, you're still reacting the same way as you would, like, doing anything. Like, even just, like, drinking coffee, you get a drug reaction from caffeine. It's like an upper. Like, you literally get that because I think the brain can react similarly to just things that you're interacting with that you're not necessarily ingesting.
And maybe this is why Let's Plays work the way they do, because, like, even though like, let's say, for example, you don't have the system, you don't have the game, but you're watching a Let's Play of it, on some principle level, it is still more feasible for you to play this game than it is for you to, like, act out The Godfather.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, it's still operating on the, your brain's still operating on the level that, like, you can do this and you are being rewarded in certain ways, even though you're not actually doing anything.
Yeah. It's it's this weird thing because a lot of people want to make movies or what have you. And there are certainly a large number of people who want to make video games. But one is exceptionally more rare than the other. And I don't think that it's entirely due to, video games just being less popular, to use the wrong word, than movies. I think a lot of that has to do with you want the experience of getting to put your vision on the big screen, whereas a lot of people are already having the experience when they're playing the game. Like, I like video games well enough. I would enjoy getting to help produce one, but I don't think I'd ever want to sit there and make a video game. I did it. It's not incredibly fun. We have this glamorized vision of movies in our head, and the production of them. But as someone who has made a movie and has made just a very, very basic video game, where it's just walk around and find stuff, one is exceptionally more enjoyable to do than the other. And I don't know, I get much more joy out of playing video games than I do out of making one. And yet, I can say I got a lot of joy out of making movies, maybe as much or more than I do watching some. So I think maybe the experience of playing a video game is enough, and so it satisfies that need to do something, because you're doing in a video game, you're watching it with a movie.
Maybe this ties into the commentary tangent we had earlier. Like you said, making a movie is very difficult, making a video game is very difficult, but like Raska points out every now and then, movies are probably the most collaborative thing we have in art. So even though it's very, very difficult, there's an element of I can still do this, that's part of it. And so at the end of the day, watching a movie without watching it on a commentary or talking about it is very satisfying in a way that the video game only matters insofar as it works.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, that movie just goes to the nature of programming in general, of one little slip up and everything's a problem. In a movie, one little slip up is you can cover.
Yeah. Very much so. Very, very, very much so. Kind of ridiculously so.
I mean, there are a lot of movies that have this thing where something went wrong and they rebuilt around it and now they ended up well or awful. The Crow's a good example.
Yeah. And you can have movies that can have a complete shit show production and then turn out to be the greatest thing ever. Cough, cough, Star Wars.
Yeah. Which is the classic example. Movies that do that, though, are either one or the other. If a movie has a clusterfuck of a production, it will either be awful or it will be amazing. There is no in between. Every time. The Shining had a really bad production and it's amazing.
The Shining is hilarious. It's just to watch the behind the scenes stuff. It's so funny.
Yeah, no, it's hysterical and terrifying in a lot of ways. Almost every Hitchcock movie had a terrible production.
And almost every Hitchcock movie is amazing.
Yep.
Yeah, it's interesting how that works, and yet when a video game has a terrible production, I mean, I can't think of a good one, or one that's even just passable, when it's got a shit show production.
Yeah, it's weird, because I think you only... Steve said this in the one where... I forget what episode it was, but Steve said that you make a movie 3 times, right? So you make it the script, filming, and then editing. So you get 3 chances to make your movie work. You get 1 chance to make your video game work, because you're just making the game, right? Mm-hmm. You do have beta, the beta phase and stuff like that, but it's still it's all the same thing. There's never
you don't
video
start
game
over.
goes from being this to this.
Yeah,
betas
don't
are not
start
the
over
shit.
after beta testing. you fix issues, you fix bugs when you beta test. You don't start the game over.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Could you imagine? Like, it was funny. I was looking into the failed Flash video game.
I
don't
love
know if
that footage.
Yeah, it's really, really neat to see what they were working toward. But you look in the production history of why it failed, and it's because the studio making it wanted to do movie properties, video games that were like gonna actually be good, but they decided to run their video game studio, like a movie production studio. Whereas, okay, so how does WB afford to make Justice League? Well, they put out all these little small projects that they know are going to be a success, and then they are able to put some of the profit used for that toward the production of Justice League, and they hope that that will be a mega success. It's probably not, but
It'll be a barely success.
Yeah, that's the formula that movie studios use. So they tried to do this with video games. They put out a bunch of fairly cheap to make video games that weren't impressive, so no one wanted to buy any of their other cheap to make video games, and so they weren't getting any money to funnel toward this awesome video game they were working on. You can't run a video game production like you can a movie production. It doesn't translate because there's a level of credibility in the video game industry that's just not there in film. Warner Brothers makes bad movies all the time. They also make brilliant movies. It's not like, okay, Steve, you're not going to go see any of the DC Extended Universe movies in theaters, right?
Right.
Are you going to go see... Would you extend that to all Warner Brothers movies?
Hell no, that's impossible.
Yeah, well, one, it's impossible, and two, it would be ridiculous anyway.
It'd be hard as hell to figure out, that's for sure.
Yeah, but you would, even if you could, you still wouldn't.
Yeah.
Because movies don't work that way. Whereas video games, yeah, I will fucking avoid the shit out of a developer if I know they're a shit show.
Yeah.
I mean, that is rational thinking.
It's weird. Pixar is one of the only examples of a movie studio operating on some level with video game logic. Where, they have their own particular track record, but because they only make one type of movie that's easier to control. It's the same way with Marvel Studios.
Yeah.
Or Lucasfilm, where, they don't do anything else. They're not. They're a branch before they're their own studio, but on a technical level, we call them a studio.
Mm-hmm. Limits of
but typically, that's not how that works. And you can't even necessarily say that Warner Brothers or Sony or any one of them are one of the greatest film studios ever, because one, they only operate on the logic that they always exist in order for you to have movies anyway, and two, they finance their good movies with filler shit rom-com. Romantic comedy is almost always universally panned, but it's always seen. If we didn't have rom-coms, we wouldn't be able to finance bigger movies.
Is this your pitch to get everyone to go see the latest rom-com, Steve?
I mean, I'll be honest, I watch them occasionally just because I think they're stupid fun.
I watch them.
All of the bad Christmas romantic comedies, I love them. All of them.
Even Four Christmases?
Yes. It's so bad.
It is. It is awful.
Have you seen Saving Christmas?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, yeah. Even that one.
Oh, man. Okay. I don't know, man. It's weird to look into the way that these things work, and so I think this idea that video games are the extension of movies and that they're gonna, movies are gonna be killed by the video game star. No, they're not. That's a foolish thing said by someone who definitely doesn't understand video games and probably doesn't understand movies.
And that's like your Star Trek example that you mentioned earlier. It's just a weird concept to think that people wouldn't watch movies, because if you go to that specific phrasing of that person, has this person never read a book?
Right?
Or, sat in a meeting? Or talked to someone who talks over you?
Mm-hmm. It's it's that really weird conception of just, I don't understand how you would not, how an art form in its entirety would die out.
Mm-hmm.
I understand how a sport will die out because people lose interest in it. I don't think that can happen with an art form. Is there an art form that we just don't fucking do anymore at all?
I mean, we
Like,
do certain things more than others. Like, we don't do as much sculpting as we used to. But, like, the definition of sculpting has evolved to such a degree that, like Brillo box Andy Warhol is somehow the same thing as ancient Greek sculptures, even though it's kind of not.
Yeah, and, like, to be fair, there's certain art forms that we can't do anymore because we've lost the technique.
Yeah.
But
We don't do shadow puppet shows anymore.
True.
Although I don't want to
Be
say
very
that
disappointed.
no one does them.
I don't know. I remember seeing shadow puppet plays in, like, elementary school and shit.
Well, I remember the bizarre things in kids' cartoons where people would do shadow puppets to give you exposition, and it'd be terrifying and make no sense of how they move their hands that way.
Yeah.
Right?
They're the thing. Their hands just, like, morphed into, like, a creepy alien thing.
Yeah, right?
There's a Teen Titans Go episode that makes fun of this. It's kind of hilarious.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's just, I can't think of an art form that is just straight up, no one does that. Like, you know, we've been playing piano for how many centuries?
I can't even count that. I don't know.
Yeah, like, and the piano's a fairly modern invention. I mean, fucking violins have been around for, again, centuries. The harp is nowhere near as popular as it used to be, but
I mean, it's still
around.
culturally relevant with, like, weddings and stuff.
Yeah,
And with the definition of art the way it's evolved, like, art used to mean very specifically sculpting, tragic drama, or comedic drama. And occasionally poetry.
Mm-hmm.
And then it became almost exclusively poetry. But, like, it never stopped any of the other ones from happening.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so I just... Like, art forms can only be created. They can never be destroyed. Someone put that on a t-shirt.
Tattoo it on yourself.
Yeah, there we go. I don't know, it's just that it's a really weird concept. So it's... Whoever said that shit definitely doesn't understand video games, probably doesn't understand movies, and certainly doesn't understand art.
Apparently the piano was created in the early 17th century.
Yeah, I figured because, you know, mechanical device and all.
Yeah.
So that's why I tried to go for older, like, you know, violin's an extension of a lyre, just with a bow.
A flute's probably older.
Probably.
Flute doesn't take much, I don't think.
I mean, okay, here we go, oldest, drums. Bam.
Yeah, you can't. The most basic you can get than drums is clapping.
Cowbell.
That is the best instrument. I don't know if it's the oldest.
Yeah.
Same
well,
with the triangle.
Yeah. Well, then there's the tambourine, or as I prefer to call it, the girlfriend instrument. Because when you get a band and one of the guys' girlfriends wants to join the band, you give it the tambourine.
The oldest known flute was dated 43,000 years before 2008.
Nice.
Huh.
Nice. Yeah, so just, like, instruments that, like, you see instruments created and they rise and fall in popularity, you know, who plays the piccolo? Stuff like that, sure. I will say that I think film will not be the titan of modern art forms that it is now.
And I mean, that could be another discussion on the notion of, like, is TV not subverting, but, like...
Replacing,
superseding film in general. Especially because we now plan film in a way we plan TV, with, like, franchises and stuff.
Yeah.
I remember very fondly an episode, a spoiler cast we did on The Amazing Spider-Man, or The Amazing Spider-Man 2, It was something Amazing Spider-Man related. And someone specifically said, isn't it refreshing that one movie doesn't have to explain everything? And, like, now that is a dirty word.
Oh, man. Yeah. Yeah. And at the same time, you almost have to do that with video games, because they take even longer to make than films if you're planning a franchise.
Oh, if a video game's coming out in a couple of years, chances are they've worked on it for at least a couple more.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Which is astonishing that we don't get more leaks from video games.
I think it's just a much smaller production crew, you know?
Yeah.
You know, production crews on movies, people do get fired on movies, you know?
Yeah.
So they get shitty and leak some stuff online. That and movie studios are experimenting with leaks as viral marketing. They leak, quote-unquote, information, but it's really, you know, it's the studio exec's marketing team doing it.
Yeah. You can also, think about movies, it's like, you can be, like, on a plane, and you look over and see, like, because I remember who it was. I saw somebody one time mention the fact that they were on a plane, and they looked over, and they saw concept art for Justice League.
Oh, wow.
That's
And
weird.
it's like, that can happen. You can have, like, The Amazing Spider-Man 2, where you see Paul Giamatti and, like, a big, weird, like, thing that's later on in post going to be changed into a giant rhino tech suit in the middle of New York. And you're like, yep, you can't really lie about what's going on over there, people.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's detrimental, where, like, they release concept stuff very early on just so they know what people's reactions be, and then they, like, tailor-make the movie based on those reactions. The Michael Bay TMNT movies are like this.
Ugh.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, to the point where they had to, like, dub in dialogue for Shredder.
Yep.
Yeah. It's weird, because just everything about them are so different. It's just some, like, parts of video games are just similar to movies. And then, you know, what we haven't talked about a lot is movies that try to be video games. Hardcore Henry.
Mm.
Like, I don't know what the hell they were thinking with that. Did anyone go to see that movie?
It failed pretty miserably.
No, I was asking in this group.
I
did not go to see it.
I wanted to. I was curious, because just as an experimental idea, but, like, it was critically panned and commercially a failure, so.
And
Yeah.
I haven't seen
And
it.
it's just like...
I was going to say, I haven't seen it, but Connor told me that one of his biggest disappointments with that movie was kind of that it cheated its own premise, where you're watching a first-person movie, and it's not like a continuous flow of time with no gaps. There are, like, he's running, and then it will cut to him a few minutes later, and he's at his destination.
Oh, boo.
It's like, well, doesn't that kind of, like, cheapen what this is? Like, it would be much different if you saw every single second of a 2-hour window in this person's time, in this person's life. You're there every single second of that. But when you start cutting
want to, like,
things,
cut
it's
down
like, what
the
the hell?
premise. Because, like, the way that movie looked, it looked like it was, like, jumping around to 100 different locations. If you were making a movie like that, you'd almost want to make it, like, Die Hard style, where, like, you open in a location, and suddenly this one location's where you are the whole movie.
And that could be really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just, I don't know, but the whole premise of, okay, I'm going to be playing a video game in a movie theater, but I'm not going to be playing the video game. I'm just going to watch someone else. Is this like a really strongly plotted video game? Probably not.
It's very weird. I heard the action wasn't even particularly that imaginative, so...
I will say it had a really good trailer.
It did. It looked exciting.
You know what? I will make a bold proclamation. If you have a Queen song in your trailer, it's a damn good trailer.
Suicide Squad?
Yeah, it's a fucking great trailer.
No, it wasn't.
It was a kick-ass trailer.
No,
I had no interest in Suicide Squad. Then I saw the trailer. I was like, that looks kind of fun.
No.
It's really weird, because I actually hated every trailer more than the last with Suicide Squad.
I don't know, man. For me, maybe that's just a rule for me. You put a Queen song in your trailer, I will think that's a good trailer.
I mean, in the 80s, every movie trailer had a Queen song, and I don't think every 80s movie's good.
I swear to God, if I
the
hear...
movie was good.
If I hear...
I didn't say the movie was good. I said it had a good trailer.
That's fair. I still wouldn't say Suicide Squad.
If I hear the song Spirit in the Sky or Highway to Hell in another fucking movie trailer, I'm going to flip shit, dude. It is so annoying.
Or that fucking Power song that was both in Power Rangers and Fantastic Four.
No one needs to have all that power.
I fucking hate that song.
I fucking hate it, too.
And they only use it for that line.
I know.
They don't even get creative with it. They just use that one fucking line. But, I mean, Kanye West music and trailers in general I could do without.
Yeah, sure.
Because Assassin's Creed trailers, I don't know what the fuck was going on. when they get to, like, I am a god.
That part, like, if they could just mute Kanye West and just use the track, that would have been fine. It's just Kanye West's voice makes it immediately funny.
Oh, fantastic.
Oh, man. I don't know, guys. I don't know. I just think video games are, again, a completely different thing, and so it's weird to see people try to capture what makes video games fun, but passively. I just don't... I need someone who really liked Hardcore Henry to explain to me what was good about it, and then I need to ask them, what's a good video game?
It's interesting. I don't know if anybody really liked Hardcore Henry that much. Like, I've never heard anybody say it was amazing. I've only ever heard people say it was kind of cool as an experience.
It's instantly forgettable. I don't know anyone that even remembers that movie came out like 2 years ago.
Yeah, and then there's like other things that theaters are doing to basically kind of like be the theme park ride. Like, I don't know, have either of you done that shit with like the seat that fucking moves?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I did it once, and I'm like, this is just uncomfortable. I'm gonna be annoyed.
I don't like that whole over-sensory experience, like the 4D smell-o-vision with the Spy Kids movie. There's a reason films have to work extra hard to make you sense things that aren't there. If you just give it to me artificially, it takes away from that experience. It's a weird thing where, like, I don't want to say know your place, but know your medium. And if you want to transgress it, you can try, but not on such a fundamental level that you are not your medium anymore.
Yeah, and like, certainly video games have this problem too. I remember my brother getting very frustrated playing the second Metal Gear Solid game, because there's like a 20-minute cutscene at one point in that game.
That game is basically an 8-hour movie. You play very little of it.
Yeah, and so I just remember him playing that and getting really fucking annoyed, because he's just like, God damn it, skip! And of course it wouldn't let you skip. Nothing is worse in a video game than an unskippable cutscene that is so fucking long, you want to get out your phone and play some Tetris.
You know what's worse than that, though? The unskippable, hyper-long cutscene that plays right before a mission where you keep dying.
Oh my god.
That is the fucking worst. And Metal Gear Solid has an assload of these.
Oh my god.
Snake.
There you go. The live-action Metal Gear Solid movie. Steve Baxi will play Octocott.
I will. An ex-girlfriend character at that point.
There's going to be Steve Baxi's cosplay.
It's very easy. I just got to, like, put on very specific clothes and I'll be fine.
It's really funny.
Yeah.
When I was in my senior year of high school, I had a graphic design class, and we were doing this thing. I forget what the official term for it was, but it was essentially using a self-portrait where you had text to create the image. So you're using like literal words. And the title of my piece, it was just a portrait of my face, and it was called. The title was Metal Gear Rasco. It was just me with my face sculpted out of words, like related to Metal Gear Solid. And like I always had a bandana on at school, and we don't know how to have bandanas, so I had this other like head wrap thing that I wore, and so it actually looked Like, I saw a snake. And so, it was just, like, in my face, it was, like, Metal Gear Rasco, and then it had, like, Solid Liquid, all these things, and then I had, like, I Am Lightning, the Rain Transformed, all this shit. It was awesome.
That's kind of badass. I want to see that.
I think I probably have it on a flash drive somewhere. It was cool.
Neat. I don't know. It's just it's weird to see video games. It's weird to see these things try to jump mediums, and I don't know. I agree with you, Steve. Not know your place, but be aware of the medium you're writing in.
Yeah. I mean, especially if you want to break its rules, you can only do that if you know them.
Yeah. Alan Moore.
Alan Moore is very hit or miss with that.
Well, like, it's neat. And I guess I'm just thinking about him more.
See what you did there.
Yeah. I'm just thinking about him more right now because I've written this whole Rotlop fan thing, and Rotlop fan makes so much more sense for an audio drama than he does for a goddamn comic book. Why would you introduce a character like that in a comic book?
Good question.
I'm gonna get a hold of Alan Moore at some point. Like, it's funny, once I make this thing, casting's almost over, so please audition now if you haven't yet, people. Once I make this thing, I'm going to, like, try to find a way to send it to Alan Moore. And I know he's going to hate it because he's Alan Moore, but I'm going to try to, like, find a way to get him to know of its existence.
You know what? This is going to be the one thing he doesn't hate, because it's not a movie and it's barely visual. Yeah, and he's going to be like, suddenly, someone did something creative with an uncreative premise. He won't even listen to it. He'll just be like, it's an audio drama, therefore, superior.
Yeah, that'd be Alan Moore for you. But I don't know, it's just like, it's so funny to me that things try to do this. And I understand wanting to break the rules of a medium and do experimental stuff like that. You know, Morrison does that shit too.
Oh yeah, he wouldn't have a career if he didn't.
But he's good at it. You know, he understands the senses because he spent so much time fucking with them. That he knows how to do a sense that you can't otherwise do, or at least capitalize on it. You know, yeah. I remember this. It's not Morrison, but it's a similar example. You remember the Riddle Me That story, Steve?
Yes, we have a review of it online.
Yeah. I love that scene where it's Riddler and Batman talking, and Batman's like skulking around him, looking at him. And then he just randomly passes his hand through Riddler in one of the panels. And Riddler goes, how'd you know? Because he's a hologram. It's like, how'd you know? And Batman goes, you have no scent. There's no way to communicate that in a comic book, but it made Batman look like a goddamn genius. That's good use of something that is beyond your medium.
If Batman had a cold that day, he would have been fucked.
Right. But still, that's good use of something beyond your medium. And I'm not saying film or video games or whatever can't do this, but you walk a fine-ass line of whether or not it's going to be successful. And so, yes, video games are not an extension or an evolution of film. They are a different art form and have different rules.
And they very clearly didn't operate under the assumption of them as companion pieces to film. Like, the earliest video games are visual simply by nature. They don't have anything to do with movies. The fact that we inject narrative into them is more about the way people think before it's about actively trying to be a movie. It's only more recently that we've been pulling that.
Yeah, and even so, like, it's still really popular to have video games with absolutely no story. Like, you know, people to this day play Tetris. People to this day play...
Space Invaders.
Space Invaders. And it's not like, okay, well, the retro ones stuck around, but now everything has a story, no matter how simplistic. Fucking no, it doesn't. Bedazzled? Does that even have a story? I don't think so. Nope. It's just click these pretty gems. Candy Crush, same shit.
And I mean, you can extend this into more narrative-driven games anyway. Like, video games are a very different beast, but like if the story sucks, that almost barely matters.
Mm-hmm.
The Devil May Cry reboot game, another example, just because I'm playing it right now, that story's fucking awful. But I love that game so much because it's got some of the most creative level design and like battle combinations of any video game I've played, particularly in that series.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like, I don't play that game for the story.
But at the same time, there are games that, even if the gameplay doesn't hold up, I will go back to for the story. So it's not like you can't do story in a video game, it's just not the... It is not the master of a video game. It is not the be-all, end-all of a video game. Whereas, it's rare for me to go back to a film and genuinely enjoy it in the way it wants me to enjoy it if I don't like the story.
Concepts of narrative are really weird in every medium. So, like, poetry can have a story. It almost always does, but it's always in, like, such abstract ways that, like, you wouldn't necessarily call it a story in the same way we would traditionally with movies. But then books operate on different rules of narrative. You don't cut out certain things in books that you'd have to with movies. Same goes for comics. Same goes for TV. Same goes for video games. So, like, this concept of story is really relative. And so, like, even when I say something like, I don't care about a video game for its story, what I'm saying about story means a very different thing than when I talk about the story failings of, like, Iron Man 1.
Yeah, and let me ask you this. Do you think that it would make more sense to adapt other mediums to film than, or not film, to video games than films? Because we usually only get, you know, the film, the video game of the movie kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
But as I think about it, and this is just a random thought that occurred to me it would make a lot more sense to try to adapt a novel to a video game than a film.
We do this sometimes.
Really?
Yeah, it's it's kind of a cheap example because comic books are visual, but like comic book video games. But like if you look at the Telltale games and Fables, that's inspired very heavily from like a non-action driven, very dialogue-y comic. Crime and Punishment is a video game. Sherlock Holmes has a series of video games.
There you go, yeah. And so those seem to just be a naturally better fit than trying to adapt a movie to a video game because, you know, aside from the fact that they're often rushed out, how many movie video game adaptations are that good?
I mean, they're always good by the standard of movie video games.
You know, and
independently great, I don't know.
Here's the thing that I wish we would do more with video games based on movies is don't say, okay, I'm either going to make like a sequel to this game don't do like a thing where you're saying, okay, we're going to make the sequel to whatever movie and like it's just not going to be canonical, but we're just going to make like they've done that with one of the Amazing Spider-Man games where it's like a sequel.
Yeah, they did it with Green Lantern.
Yeah. I don't like that. I don't like when we try to take the movie and make it a game. What I do want is where you take something from a movie that would be a great game mechanic, and then you just make that, and you don't really try to make like a story. You just make like a game mode almost, and make it really fleshed out. So my go-to example with this is I have wanted to fucking play a Aliens Colonial Marines game that is just literally Left 4 Dead, replace the zombies with aliens. Or something like Nazi Zombies from Call of Duty where it's like a horde mode with aliens where you just have to survive. Because when you watch a movie like Aliens and it's like a defend the house type plot. We're in this area and we have to survive in this area for this amount of time. I would love to just make an Aliens game where you're in, and not to say that we've never gotten good Aliens games because we have, but we've never gotten this specific idea just taken to an extreme and made a whole game out of it. We got a game mode with Aliens Colonial Marines, but that game was so fucking poorly made and just bashed. By the time that they added this as DLC, nobody touched it except for me and a few other people. And like I saw it there, it was like the blueprint for how you do it, and it pissed me off. Make an Aliens game where you're in an area and you can fortify the area, and then you just have to survive that area for a certain amount of time. Can we get more games like that where you just look at a movie and you say, okay, we'll do this as this? Like, how cool would a Terminator game be? Where literally it's like Grand Theft Auto. You're in a huge fucking city, and there's a Terminator after you. and you just have to run from the fucking Terminator. And, like, you can figure out ways you can maybe kill it, but you start off with nothing and very little abilities or skills. And it's you in a whole city, and there's a Terminator after you. That would be so much fun, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, especially if you cash in on, like, the more horror aspect of that. Like, horror movie monsters that, like, miraculously teleport from one location to the other. The Friday the 13th games, I think, just do this the wrong way, where you're in charge of the monster. I think it'd be a lot more interesting if, like, you did almost Slenderman style.
Steve.
Yeah.
It follows the video game.
Yes.
Oh my god.
Yes.
Not only will it make sex mortifying, it'll make video games mortifying.
Oh my god.
Oh, dude, you'd have to, like, fucking go, like, you see it coming after you, so you have to, like, drive across town really quick and then go sleep with a prostitute to give yourself more time.
Oh, dude, that would be so cool, because, like, how it would work is it would have, like, the Sims mode, where in Sims, you can build, like, your relationship. And so, like, you have to be friendly first. If you want two Sims to sleep together, they got to go up and you got to, like, have, like, a friendly introduction or, like, a funny introduction, or you can choose what. And, like, you have to kind of, like, work out what kind of things did this person respond to positively or negatively, and then you can get to flirtation,
and then like, you
can,
get
like, do a pickup line and then have sex with them. And that would be so great.
Yeah, but, like, you could make it, like, really fucking emotional. Like, you introduce yourself to these characters just to make the attempt to try to sleep with them so that they'll get murdered first. And, like, they could really fucking get at your soul, and then you just feel like an asshole for doing it.
And you should be able to tell them what's going to happen. So, like, if you find someone that you really like and you slept with and the monster is after them, then you can be like, okay, here's what you need to know so you can go fuck somebody else so you don't get killed and they will. Like, you can, like, if you actually like the character.
Oh, dude. Like, you'd have to be careful about, like, what regions of the city you do this shit in, because then, like, you could get picked up by the police because they'd think that you're the one killing these people.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
this would be so fucking intricate and amazing.
Yeah.
Oh, man. We gotta get a hold of a game studio and tell them about our It Follows video game idea.
Yeah, that's cool.
I think the only stipulation with that game, though, is I think it'd be infinitely more interesting if no matter what, you always die.
Maybe it's like one of those race against the clock video games. Like, you gotta try to get, like, classic high score style video games.
Yeah.
Like, the longest time's the highest score.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I wouldn't want this game to be broken in such a way where, like, you can have an infinite loop and, like, the monster never gets you.
Yeah, I gotcha. Oh, man, that's a cool idea.
Yeah.
Huh. Alright, I found the episode clip. It Follows, the video game.
That'd be awesome.
Oh, man. Alright. Well, actually, it's funny to make that the episode clip, because I feel like we're also kind of done talking about this.
They're going to have to wait all the way
else...
to the end of the episode for this. You asshole.
Yeah. Does anyone else have anything else they want to talk about?
Not really.
I'm good.
No? I'm good, too. Alright, Steve, it should be your pick, but I'm hijacking your review topic pick.
Sounds good to me. What do we review?
Yeah. Because we're going to be reviewing a little movie where monsters come out of the ocean from another world, and humans build giant robots in order to fight them.
Finding Nemo?
No.
Damn. Finding Dory?
No.
Shark Tales?
Yes.
Really?
No. Oh. Anyway, everyone, thanks very much for watching. Until next time, I'm the Philosopher.
I am the Exile.
And I'm the Beta Male Cuck. And I'd just like to point out before we end this episode, I was right, we did ramp up. The ending was much more high energy.
Indeed it was. Thanks for watching, everyone. We are your geeky gentlemen, and we will be discussing things.